All right, very good. I know that some people are still coming. One more time, I'm so thankful that after his busy schedule and research that he's doing and all the other activities that Dr. Pawlak was able to be with us. Thank you so much. And this is his last presentation for today, only for today.
Thank you. It's good to have you back, and hopefully a few others will still join us. We will switch gears somewhat, okay? So the first two lectures that I had was from the series Forever Young, but I was also asked to speak on, or at least give you a sample from my other series of lectures on dietary misconceptions, okay? So this will be one of them, and we will actually not just have one lecture on one dietary misconception, but we will deal with 3 different, relatively common dietary misconceptions. I don't know if you notice and if you would agree with me that when it comes to diet/nutrition, everybody is an expert, right? You know, everybody who checked out, you know, a couple of websites is an expert, and as a result, we have, you know, completely sometimes contrary dietary recommendations. Okay, so I will share again with you 3 different common ones. I actually just released a book on this particular issue. Unfortunately for most of you, not all of you, some of you speak Polish. The book was released in Polish, so for English version we have to wait a little bit. Okay, without further ado, this is what we will be dealing with. Okay, does olive oil damage arterial walls and therefore contributing to atherosclerosis and cardiovascular complications? That's a relatively popular view. Do dairy products cause cancer? Another one. And then coconut oil and Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, and more. I don't know if you notice, but if you go to any health food store, you will find coconut oil on the shelf, at least in the last couple of years or so, you know, maybe a bit longer, right? You'll find this product. We'll review whether there's something to it. Let's begin with the olive oil question, okay? And here's where it comes from. It actually comes from a quite respected physician, and he's very influential in promoting a healthy lifestyle. And I actually like the way he speaks, Dr. McGregor, but I disagree, and you will see in a second, with this statement. The relative paralysis of our arteries for hours after eating fast food and cheesecake may also occur after consuming olive oil. There have also been studies showing that even extra virgin olive oil, contrary to expectations, may significantly impair endothelial function. Now, I'm going to assume, although I will review this briefly also yet one more time, that after my first and after my second lecture, you somewhat understand what he's referring to, right? Remember, the inner surface of our arteries is composed of, or is lined with, endothelial cells, okay? So he's talking about that even extra virgin olive oil may cause some damage to these cells and therefore contributing to cardiovascular complications. So let's review this. Again, we have the same illustration here of whether endothelial cells are found. And again, as these cells are damaged or when they die, this is the beginning of the atherosclerosis process, right? So another part of introduction, we stressed this last night. Atherosclerosis is characterized by chronic inflammation. It is an inflammatory disease, and that means we can actually measure the inflammation. We have specific biomarkers that are used to measure inflammation, and these biomarkers are or can be interpreted as what risk are we at in terms of developing cardiovascular events. Further, markers of inflammation have been shown to be upregulated in different forms of cardiovascular disease. That means what? They are higher, right, than otherwise we would have, right? And to correlate with vascular risk. Further, inflammatory mechanisms are important participants in the pathophysiology of hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. So let's look at two of markers of inflammation. And notice this quote that I selected here for you comes from meta-analysis. Do you remember from Friday night what meta-analysis is? If you don't remember, or if you were not here, I don't know how you will do on the exam that we will have right after I finish here. The meta-analysis, just a reminder, is when we have many studies and we want to kind of evaluate what's the take-home message, what we can learn from it, we can run the meta-analysis and learn from it, okay? So notice what it says here. Olive oil interventions with daily consumption ranging approximately between 5 to 50 grams. 5 grams, that roughly means 1 teaspoon, okay? So from relatively small amount, right, a teaspoon of olive oil, to quite a bit of olive oil, 50 grams, which translates to about 10 teaspoons, okay, resulted in a significantly more pronounced, what does it say? Decrease in C-reactive protein. What in the world is this term C-reactive protein? Well, it is a marker, notice, of inflammation and cardiovascular disease, okay? And so notice if we are talking about a decrease, and even pronounced decrease in C-reactive protein, would that be beneficial or would that be detrimental for cardiovascular system? It's actually beneficial, right? Because remember, these markers are what? Upregulated, which means what? They are higher if something inflammatory is taking place in the arteries, okay? And then also another marker, interleukin 6, which actually is also a marker of inflammation and even stronger predictor of cardiovascular disease than this particular biomarker, okay? And so when we look at this particular marker, it is also pronounced what? We also see pronounced decrease in this when we ingest olive oil, okay? As compared to controls. Beneficial, detrimental? Beneficial, right? If this marker goes down, that is beneficial rather than being detrimental, okay? And then another marker, valued of flow-mediated dilatation was given as absolute percentage, were significantly more increased in individuals subjected to olive oil intervention. Now, what is this? A marker of dilating effect of the blood vessels, meaning what? The arterial walls are what? Expanding, right? Not shrinking, but expanding. That's beneficial, detrimental? It's beneficial, right? Because it would what? Decrease blood pressure, for example, and therefore decrease risk for complications, okay? And then notice this, a final quote from this study. These results provide evidence that olive oil might exert beneficial effects on endothelial function, as well as markers of inflammation and endothelial function, thus representing a key ingredient contributing to the cardiovascular protective effect of a Mediterranean diet. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that Dr. Greger made up something. There might have been a study that showed that it was actually not beneficial. But again, when we use meta-analysis, we want to evaluate the take-home message from all of different studies, you see? We have studies that we consider outliers because they show something different than the bulk of studies. The bulk of the studies point in this direction, and say one study or a couple of studies point in this direction. See, the preponderance of evidence is showing that it is beneficial rather than it is detrimental. And in fact, we have additional data to support this conclusion. Notice the results indicate an overall overall risk reduction of all-cause mortality, 11% cardiovascular mortality, 12% cardiovascular events, 9%, and stroke, 17%, when comparing the top versus bottom third of monounsaturated fatty acids, olive oil, oleic acid, and monounsaturated fatty acids to saturated fatty acid ratio. However, only olive oil seemed to be associated with reduced risk of these complications here, okay? Further, notice, results specific to olive oil, compare top to bottom tertile. That means compare people with the highest to those with the lowest intake of olive oil, okay? Notice what they found. All-cause mortality, 23% reduction. Among whom? Those with the top or highest intake in comparison to those with the lowest. And then cardiovascular disease mortality, 30% reduction. Cardiovascular disease events, 28% reduction, okay? And so we can conclude that the best available evidence does not support a conclusion that olive oil damages arterial endothelium, which means endothelial cells, okay? The best evidence indicates that the use of olive oil results in an improvement in the endothelial function and risk of overall and cardiovascular disease mortality. That's what we find, and this is definitely true, or especially true for what we call the virgin olive oil. Just to translate or define the terms, the term virgin means that it was cold derived, okay? I actually had the opportunity to go to a manufacturing plant of olive oil on the island of Zakynthos. It's a Greek island. And you know, they no longer squeeze the olives as they did in the past. They actually have a mechanical way of crushing the olives. And in the process, they actually add a little bit of water, because they found that if they add a little bit of water, it is easier for them to derive the oil. And then the water is isolated, and you actually, the end product is the olive oil. And the water, even the water is 25 degrees Celsius, which is about 75, 76 degrees Fahrenheit. So everything is cold or room temperature kind of derived, you know. And we find that the phytochemicals, which means compounds found in plant foods, in this case in olives, are associated with the reduction in risk for cardiovascular disease and other health outcomes among those who ingest that virgin olive oil. Okay? Let's look at this issue. Do dairy products cause cancer? Now, before I go any further, I shared with you last night, I really don't eat dairy products. The only time I may eat dairy products is when I travel. I was in South Africa, for example, and they had really good cereal. They didn't have soy milk, so I mixed that cereal with yogurt, for example. When I go to my mom, to Poland, and my mom serves something, my mom is perfectly capable of making vegan food, but she usually puts a little bit of cheese on the table. Well, I may take a slice now and then, you know. But again, at home, I don't buy dairy products. I don't eat them. So this is not, you know, a person or whatever. I just wanted to show you data on whether dairy products cause cancer. We will start with where this notion come from, okay? So here's a quote from another respected scientist, Dr. Campbell, and it says, casein is the most relevant chemical carcinogen ever identified. Make no mistake about it. We can turn on and turn off cancer. Turn on by increasing casein consumption. By extension, because casein is found in milk and dairy products, the idea is that dairy products cause cancer, okay? Now, before I actually show you data whether there's something to disclaim or not, I want to ask you this question. When was it last time you went to a grocery store and bought yourself a few ounces or a few pounds of casein? See, we don't typically go and buy casein, and we don't manage on casein, right? When we do eat casein, that casein counts in what? In the natural environment that it is found, meaning in milk, in other dairy products, you see? Is it correct to assume that isolated cases would have the same health impact that casein found in that natural environment? Sometimes it would be, the answer would be yes. Sometimes it may be no. Oftentimes it is no, because that natural environment may actually have a little bit different impact on the given health outcome that we may be looking at, okay? And so again, this statement might actually be true when it comes to isolated casein. But we ingest casein from milk and so on, and if you still have if this doesn't convince you, this argument, let's call it, did you know that we also ingest casein when we are breastfed by our mom? You know, human milk contains casein just like cow's milk does, you see? Are we to tell moms not to do that? You know, that breast milk is considered the best food for the developing infant, but it contains casein. Does it mean that moms is passing on something to the infant that potentially causes cancer? Are you with me what I'm saying here? Okay? So there's, quite a few things to consider when answering this particular question. But let's look at the data. And here again I have data from the Adventist Health Study 2. And here we have noticed deaths, okay? And here we have deaths from cancer. And the reference for this particular study are non-vegetarians, okay? In comparison to non-vegetarians, notice that the vegans had 8%, that's what this 0.92 indicates, 8% lower risk of death, again, in comparison to non-vegetarians. But lacto-ovo-vegetarians had 0.9, that means 10% lower risk of death versus 8% for vegans. Now, how is it that dairy products cause cancer, but lacto-ovo-vegetarians have lower risk of death in comparison to those who don't ingest these products? Are you with me? It makes no sense, right? Does it? It makes no sense. Let's look further. This is a quote from the Adventist Health Study. In the Adventist Health Study 2, we compared study members who were the highest dairy consumers, top 20%, to the lowest bottom 20%. The high dairy consumers had about 70%, what? Is that typo? No, it's not. It's less risk for colorectal cancer than the low consumers, but there was little or no difference for colon cancer. Most of the association of dairy with rectal cancer seem to come from differences in milk consumption. Here, this is Dr. Keyes from Loma Linda University, Dr. Sabata and other researchers from Loma Linda University, very well respected worldwide researchers, claim that dairy products actually do what? Reduce the risk for specific type of cancer. So how is it possible that dairy causes cancer and we have reduction if we actually ingest more of them versus less of them? Further, vegan diet seems to confer lower risk for overall and female-specific cancer compared to other dietary patterns. The lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet seems to confer protection from cancers of the gastrointestinal tract. So again, we are talking about protection. And what I actually did, I will spare you from that, but a longer version of this presentation, or in a longer version of this presentation, I actually included data from all published meta-analyses to date that were not sponsored by the National Dairy Council. Because the National Dairy Council is the organization that actually profits financially from the sale of these products. So I excluded those meta-analyses, but I have results from all of the meta-analyses, okay? And again, I will not expose you to all of this data because it would be a little bit longer than we want to be here, but I will share with you this quote that pretty much summarizes what we see in all these other meta-analyses. Meta-analysis of cohort data available today support an inverse association between milk intake and risk of colorectal and bladder cancer, and a positive association between diets high in calcium and risk of prostate cancer. Positive association means what? The more we eat of it, the higher the risk, right? Negative association means the more we eat of it, the lower the risk. So the reality is that here it is, a conclusion that dairy products cause cancer is too simplistic at best and misleading at worst. And then secondly, available research shows an increased risk of prostate cancer associated with milk intake and a decreased risk of colorectal cancer associated with dairy products intake. The impact of milk and dairy products on other cancer sites is less clear, Sometimes we see slight reduction or slight increase or no impact whatsoever. Now, I want to elaborate also further. I have been vegetarian and vegan for the last many years, but not eating meat for now almost 35 years or so. And for the first maybe about 18 years, maybe 16, 17, 18 years or so, I've been lacto-vegetarian. And at that time, I started developing the class that I still teach called Vegetarian Nutrition. Now, I didn't want to just talk about the health benefits or health outcomes among vegetarians or how to plan so you don't develop nutrient deficiencies. But I also wanted, I actually in this class have a little bit history of vegetarianism. We talk about individuals like Ellen White or Dr. Kellogg, for example, in this class. And then I also wanted to discuss some of the reasons why people become vegetarians. So we talk about health aspects, we talk about religious aspects, we talk about some of the ethical consideration, we talk about the fact that cows were created ruminants, but now they are kept in confined area. Instead of ranching on grass, they are given to eat, dead animals. They are standing all the time with feces up to their knees and things of that nature. I believe, honestly, and those discoveries, which I was not aware of before, made me to decide to become practical vegan, because I didn't want to spend my money, to give my money to support that organization. I mean, the people who actually, abuse these animals in this way. So I actually believe we have a good reason not to ingest whether milk or dairy products, because of these ethical considerations. But when it comes to cancer, it's just not supported. The idea that dairy or milk or dairy products vastly are not supportive, other than perhaps prostate cancer. Okay? With that said, let's look at the third issue, and actually we have here 3 parts. Does coconut or coconut oil prevent Alzheimer's disease? Is coconut heart healthy, or coconut oil heart healthy? And then, is coconut oil the best oil used in frying? Have you ever heard any of these? Yeah? Well, let's deal with the first issue to begin with, the very last one actually. Is coconut oil good for frying? The argument is that it is the best for frying of all oils. Have you heard that? Okay? Because it has, the claim states, the highest smoke point. Okay? Well, let's examine this. Okay? Here's notice a publication in very good journal, Nutritional Reviews, who says it is suitable for single-use shallow frying, although it is not recommended for continuous deep fat frying because of its what? Low smoke point, which may lead to the production of potential carcinogenic substances upon overheating. In fact, if you look at the smoke temperature of a number of different oils, notice that coconut is the very last. It has one of the lowest temperature, not the highest, which is what the claim states. Okay? So the reality is actually completely opposite to, again, what their claim states. Okay? Let's look into the other issue, coconut oil and cardiovascular disease. Okay? And so here we have another review or meta-analysis which states the coconut oil interventions resulted in significant higher total cholesterol level in all trials. Now, when we have higher cholesterol, would that be beneficial or detrimental? It's actually detrimental, right? With significantly higher LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, in 6 trials, and with no significant difference in 1 trial. High-density lipoprotein cholesterol was significantly higher after the coconut oil intervention in 5 of the trials, with no significant difference observed in the remaining 2 trials. Let's continue. Ratios of total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol or the LDL cholesterol to HDL cholesterol were examined in only 2 of these studies. One study reported a significantly higher LDL to HDL cholesterol, that would be detrimental, okay, after a coconut oil diet compared with a corn oil diet. while one reported a significantly lower ratio of total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol following a coconut oil diet compared with an olive oil diet. So what exactly this boils down to? Well, here it is. This review does not support popular claims purporting that coconut oil is a healthy oil in terms of reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease. There was no evidence that coconut oil acted consistently different from other sources, other saturated fats in terms of its effect on blood lipids and lipoproteins. And then last quote from this publication, this review found no evidence that coconut oil should be reviewed differently from other sources of dietary saturated fat with regard to dietary recommendations. This is in line with recommendations from the American Heart Association and the US Department of Agriculture's Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2010, which suggests that coconut oil is not preferable to other saturated fats. Okay, and so again, the claim seems to be bogus. Okay, actually, I said that was the last one. This is yet another one summarizing the results. Overall, the weight of the evidence from interventional studies today suggests that replacing coconut oil with cis unsaturated fats would alter blood lipid profiles in a manner consistent with a reduction in risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Basically, this quote states, use different types of oil. The reality is, I'm going to tell you how it is done in our kitchen. We really only use olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, okay, in our kitchen. Even though I watched once a recipe on YouTube for a Korean dish, and that recipe called for sesame seed oil. And I bought that, and it's been now in the kitchen for, I don't know, 3 months or so, and I never used it since. Only used it once. We just use extra virgin olive oil. Even though it is more expensive than the others, it's worth it, I believe. Coconut oil and the risk of Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so again, I want you to see what the studies are telling us, or what the authors of the publications are telling us, rather than you believing what I say. So another quote, the claim of efficacy for coconut oil use in AD, that's Alzheimer's disease, has not been substantiated in any case report in the medical and scientific literature. The postulated mechanism for the effect was the content of caprylic acid, a medium chain triglyceride, okay, that restored brain function as portrayed in this video. I need to stop at this point of time. Where does the idea that coconut oil is helpful for patients with Alzheimer's disease come from? There was a pediatrician in Florida whose husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And at one point of time, this patient started eating more or larger amounts of coconut oil. And apparently, I have to admit, I have never watched that video. Never I watched the video, but according to different sources, there was some improvement in the functioning of this particular individual. And this pediatrician, the husband, concluded that coconut oil is beneficial to Alzheimer's disease. That's what the quote is referring to here, okay? Now, I want to tell you that this particular patient, actually on the website of his wife, we can find that he died in 2016, if I correctly remember, okay? So the coconut oil that he was ingesting, even if there was some improvement in the way he functioned, at best was what? A very short-term, had a very short-term effect. Because he died, again, a few years back. And in reality, when you know a little bit more about this patient and this particular physician, his wife, she at one point of time advocated coconut oil, and then later on she started using terms like medium chain fatty acids, when we look at fats or fatty acids, they are not only divided into saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated, they are also divided into how many carbons they have in their structure, chemical structure. Okay? We can have short fatty acids, 8 or fewer, okay? 8 or fewer carbons in the structure. Then we have medium, and then we have long ones. The long ones can be up to 24 carbons, okay? So she started recommending the medium chain, the ones that have 10 and 12 carbons in the structure. So she went away from just recommending specifically also, what you call it, coconut oil to medium chain, which, you know, they come also from other sources. But we find again that at best they may have only short-term benefits. Let me introduce you to a quote from another organization. This is Dementia Blog, okay? And here's what we read. This is, again, from this website. Coconut oil as a treatment for Alzheimer's. It's one of those claims that has rambled on for a few years now. But so far, research has been inconclusive. So there's little evidence to say it can be of any help. Companies selling nutritional drinks and making claims about their effects don't count. And while anecdotes from individuals can be compelling, sadly these claims cannot be verified and need to be treated with caution. In fact, it's best to be wary about any claims around coconut oil or other foods or supplements, as well as not proven benefits. There are potential harm. And then last one, Alzheimer's Association. And here again we have received quite a few questions recently about whether or not coconut oil can be used to treat Alzheimer's disease. This is a topic that comes up often, so I thought it would be helpful to provide some background. This theory has to do with substances called ketones. You may have heard of those, right? Ketones. Okay? The damage caused by Alzheimer's disrupt the brain ability to use its primary energy source, known as glucose. The brain naturally gets a portion of its energy from ketone bodies when glucose is less available, for example, during fasting and so on. Ketones may provide an alternative energy source to the brain's cells to moderate the damage caused by Alzheimer's disease. The body produces ketones when it metabolizes coconut oil and similar substances, fatty acids. Further we read, unfortunately, there just isn't any credible science to support this idea. It is possible for us to know, it is rather impossible for us to know how well coconut oil does or does not work in Alzheimer's disease because there have not been rigorous, large-scale research studies done. And this is basically what we have repeated over and over and over again. The claims that you find, whether you read the label or whether you hear to some people who are trying to sell this, are simply not supported by studies. Studies oftentimes take time. They may be done over many years sometimes, at least several years, and the findings are not yet simply available. For the sake of time, well, maybe very briefly I address this. This is actually from Dr. Winston Craig. Anyone familiar with him? Yes? Dr. Winston Craig, for over 4 years, was the chair of the Department of Nutrition at Andrews University. In fact, when I studied there, he was the chair, he was my chair in that department. And with his student, he presented this at Loma Linda University during the 7th International Congress on Vegetarian Nutrition. Okay, so this will be our summary. Notice coconut oil, which some describe as the healthiest oil on earth, has become a superfood in the diet of many vegetarians and others. Many claims have been made for the oil, such as reversing the effects of cognitive impairment and slowing the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Proponents of coconut oil claim it provides help for arthritis, is useful for treating depression and protective against heart disease. A review of 21 studies reported that coconut oil, which contains about 85% saturated fat, raised total and LDL cholesterol relative to other plant oils. Studies with primates revealed that coconut oil also increases the risk of blood clots. Indigenous people or populations in Asia and the Pacific that include fresh coconut in the traditional cuisine and have low rates of heart disease typically consume a lot of vegetables, tubers, fruits, and fish, and are more active than Westerners by using a little coconut oil. Coconut oil does not appear to live up to all the hype, okay? And I definitely prescribe to this, so this was very well said. With that said, I promised you I'm going to give you my email address. So here it is. You have it on the screen. If you have some questions here, I'll be happy to answer if I know the answer. If a question comes up later on, you can contact me. You're welcome to. You also see my web address. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened for about a month or a month plus now. I cannot access my own website. Whether I go to this, whether I go to this website or whether I go as an administrator, it disappeared. I don't know what happened. I cannot find any contact information to WordPress. If you have any computer experts here that deal with websites, please talk to me afterwards. I had a lot of lectures and articles and other useful information on this website. But try it out. I might just, fix it down the road sometimes, okay? So that's email and website, if it works one of these days, I hope. The first two lectures that I shared with you are based on this book, Forever Young, Secrets of Delaying Aging and Living Disease-Free. And then part of what was in the lecture was also taken from this book, even though the previous book I shared with you has a chapter on vitamin B12. And then I have also this book, Healthy Diet Without Secrets. As I said, everyone is an expert on nutrition, right? And there are, thousands of different diets. If you read this book, you will not be introduced to Roman Pawlak's diet. I basically describe prudent dietary principles based on not hundreds but thousands of scientific studies. And I also give you some interesting background in this. In fact, with my wife, we were in Europe this summer, and we went to this one museum where they actually had on display an Egyptian female who was kneading a dough, to make bread. And that was very interesting for me, because in this book, I actually described this. I said in this book that scientists found this, in the Egyptian tombs and so on, but I have never seen it before. And this summer, I actually have seen this in my own eyes, what I described in this book. So you will have some interesting background about certain foods and stuff like that, including some biblical background also. Then I have this book, In Defense of Vegetarianism. It actually deals with not only the health aspects, but also some of those ethical issues that I mentioned when I talked about feeding cows with, dead animals and stuff like that. And the last section here deals with how to plant so you don't develop iron deficiency or B12 deficiency or other nutrient deficiency. Then I have this one. This one obviously is for different population. It's for vegetarian pregnant and lactating women, and then for parents who want to feed their young children with vegetarian diet, okay? My separate love, other than nutrition, is theology or the Bible, biblical studies. And so I also have a biblical book that deal with the nature of Christian hope. You may have heard some people believe that when we die, our soul goes to heaven and or hell and or purgatory. And then there are other Christians, and I'm in that category, that believe that when we die, we know of nothing, we sleep unconsciously in the grave until Jesus comes. And in this book, I deal with biblical passages, and I also deal with some passages that seem to say something different than we sleep in the grave. I don't have all of them, but I brought 3 books with me. You know, when you fly, you have to be limited in terms of what or how much luggage you bring with me. And I'm sure you know the Bible says that we support our leaders, right? So this would be my gift to your pastor here. So Pastor, I hope you will enjoy reading this, and this will be, you know, expansion of what we discussed here during this seminar. And with that, if you have any additional questions, whether on this issue or what we talked about on the previous lecture or last night, or maybe by extension other dietary issues, if I know the answer, I'm glad to answer your questions.
Thank you again. Just a real basic question. You discussed a couple oils that are good and a couple that really fallacy kind of helps. What about fish oils or avocado oils? Have you looked at those at all? Or?
So the fish oil we discussed last night, actually. You know, the fish oil contains the beneficial fatty acids EPA and DHA. They are definitely beneficial, but I don't necessarily advocate using the fish-derived fish oil, because as a Christian, I stick with the biblical principles of certain animals being clean, which are those that are suitable for us to use, and others being unclean, which the Bible calls an abomination, we are not to use. And we just don't know where that oil comes from. But we have algal equivalent, right? So made of seaweed, plant source. And, you know, that's I forget where I put the package. I showed you one that I use actually myself. So they are definitely beneficial. And you also asked about avocado. Yeah, I have to say there are other oils like avocado or grapeseed and hemp seed oil that I simply have not studied much. So I don't know. I would assume that if it's again virgin, meaning cold pressed, there might be some benefits to it. But I don't know as much about these oils. I am just convinced based on as much research that I've done on extra virgin olive oil. That's what I stick with. But likely there are some benefits to it, but I just don't know them on top of my head. Yes?
I have some questions about B12, but I will leave it for later because people fresh about this demonstration. So my question about this demonstration about quote from Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
As far as I know, Dr. Campbell wasn't really concerned as much about cancer as he was concerned about heart disease and heart-related like deaths, which is like much bigger killer for people than cancer at this point. And I think his research in his quote was more addressing not cancer but heart diseases. And in fact, most of people would go to general doctors, not vegan vegetarian doctors, they would tell them stop using dairy products rather than stop eating meat, or before you stop eating meat, as dairy products would bring more inflammation and other negative effects in human body than just the meat. Can you address it, please?
Yes. So as I read, in fact, not just read, I met Dr. Campbell, okay? I met him at one of the conferences. And you can watch, for example, Forks Over Knives, for example. You can read his book, The China Study. And clearly he's referring to cancer when it comes to this compound casein. In his book, for example, he has charts. When he talks, here was this amount of casein versus this amount of casein, and how did it impact cancer development. He claims that you can turn off cancer and turn on cancer depending on the type of protein that you use, and the detrimental one being casein. I'm not saying here that in some of his comments perhaps he's not also concerned about cardiovascular disease, but this issue of casein is for sure he relates this to the risk of cancer. And then about the doctors not advocating dairy products, to be honest, I've never heard of that. And I would be surprised what would be the reason why, the recommendation would be, whether decreasing or discontinuing dairy products in cases of some cancer. As I showed you, and again, this was maybe short because I didn't want to take too much time and show you too much data, but I have a much longer part on the dairy product and cancer, in which I have findings from meta-analysis, and they show one after another that there is no higher risk of many different cancers other than really a prostate cancer. In fact, there are some studies that showed a slight reduction in ovaries cancer, for example. But the acceptance or the accepted view is that they increase risk for prostate cancer, they decrease risk for colorectal cancer. The others are not as certain. So I don't see really, honestly, a reason for decreasing the intake when you are diagnosed. Yes. Yeah.
For those of us who weren't able to be here last night, can you kind of summarize the EPA and DHA presentation?
I am always surprised when students, when it's time to take the exam, ask specific questions what they may be tested on. So last night we were talking about two beneficial compounds that we simply refer to as EPA, the eicosapentaenoic acid, and DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. These are two fatty acids from the omega-3 family. And, we ingest those from marine animals, which I don't recommend. We can get them from plant-derived supplements, which is what I take also. And I shared some findings about decreased risk of a variety of conditions, including cardiovascular risk, brain atrophy, reduction in the brain atrophy rate, and things like that. They are also associated with a reduction in depression, for example. They are recommended for pregnant women and breastfeeding women because they are needed for neurological structure development and growth. And so they have a variety of different health implications. And we have very few sources. We have some good sources, plant sources of another compound from the omega-3 family, alpha-linolenic acid, but the benefits are not the same as when we ingest the EPA and DHA, especially the DHA. We look at the data, for example, on depression and cognitive decline, and so we found that the DHA especially was helpful in that, So that's what we were discussing. So I understand the lecture was recorded, correct?
Yes, it is.
Would it be posted on a website or link, or even if it's not yet now, but maybe we can make this available, and for those who were not able to be, you could watch it, at the later time. So.
Yeah, it is going to be posted.
Yes. Okay. So it
I
will
just
be. So
wanted to see
if you
them.
keep in
I
touch
don't
with
saw
the
them.
pastor, maybe, or another representative of the church here, you will get the link. So, yes. Thank you. Yes, right here.
Oh, right here.
What do you think about the SOS diet?
What is SOS? I'm not sure what you are referring
Salt, oil, sugar, not.
to. Say that one more time.
Not salt, sugar, oil.
Oh, not salt and sugar. Is that
And
what
oil.
you're referring to?
Oil,
And oil?
SOS. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Never heard this term SOS. Okay. So, look, one of the best manuscript on healthy eating that was ever written is one called Counsels on Diet and Foods. Okay, it was written by a 19th century reformer, Ellen White, who was also a co-founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And one of the things that you will find in that description is that not only we need to choose the best foods possible, but we need to make them palatable. We need to make them tasty, you see. I have a friend in Canada who doesn't use salt at all in his cooking. Trust me, you don't want to be invited by him for dinner. It doesn't taste good, you see, okay? Now, on the other hand, when you look at the data in terms of salt intake, for example, okay, even when we look at younger adults, they have about 2.5 times the intake of salt that is recommended. Okay, the older adults have a little lower, perhaps, intake, but they have not as efficient kidneys, and so they were not able to get rid of most of the salt, and that then results in some complications. So we have these two extreme kind of positions: no salt at all versus intake too much. The same goes with sugar. You know, the average intake of refined sugar, or added sugar, I should say, added sugar in the United States is roughly about 35 teaspoons per day. That's the average. Now, I don't know how much I ingest of added sugar a day. Maybe a teaspoon, maybe when the blueberries are rather, strawberries are in season, and I love the strawberries in a little bowl, and I mash them, and then I may add maybe half a teaspoon of sugar. Maybe if I have too many strawberries, I'm going to have 2 teaspoons. So if the average is 35, that means some people eat a lot of sugar, you see? You know, in a can of soda, we have about 10 teaspoons of sugar. So we have this, you know, extreme spectrum where people ingest so much sugar that a third or more of the calories is sugar or added sugar, you see? On the other hand, you know, when we have a piece of chocolate, let's say, now and then, we may find a little bit of sugar in there. I don't think that's going to harm anyone. You see what I mean? So we need to be a balanced view, you know? When I make apple pie, for example, I make vegan apple pie, and to the apples and sometimes blueberries or figs that I may add a little bit of honey or a little bit of date syrup. But I'm talking a little bit. It may be, I never measure. I'm one of those cooks or bakers that never measure, just about this much, you know. I don't know, it may be 3 tablespoons, say, and that lasts for about a week and a half. And then, you know, I'm not the only one who eats that. So there's very little added sweetener per day, you see. We need to make food palatable, but when we eat too much of something, that would be detrimental. When it comes to oil, again, I mentioned to you that there are some oils that are actually beneficial for our health, and I believe strongly that the virgin olive oil is one of those, you know. So we should not necessarily ingest very low fat/oil diet. We should choose wisely and discard perhaps fat or oil that may be detrimental and choose the one that may be beneficial. You know, and again, not exaggerate, but you know, when I take a half a block of tofu and I want to fry it on both sides and put on my sandwich, I'm going to put about a teaspoon of oil and fry that with, right? That is an amount that I think, you know, will never be detrimental, you see? So, okay? Okay, the mom behind you.
Yes, what are your thoughts on nutritional yeast for B12?
Excellent question. So, if nutritional yeast is fortified with B12, it will be adequate. It will be, what's the word? Preventive. It will increase vitamin B12 level, or it would maintain vitamin B12 level. But you would have to ingest it on a daily basis. And not all nutritional yeast is fortified with B12, so you have to make sure that it is actually fortified with B12. But the B12, again, will be from the same source. Whether we are talking a supplement or nutritional yeast, it will be bacteria-derived, okay? But it will be effective. If we take roughly about 2 tablespoons of it on a daily basis, you will get what you need. Yes.
As we start to talk about B12, a lot of companies which offer more expensive type of B12 supplements, they talk about advantage of their specific supplements because digestion and because quality, which is kind of same. And like quality in terms of like possibly less toxins or not as like some kind of additional things there. And you demonstrated or show what you use like from Walmart. How long have you taken it, and what do you think about like paying a little bit more and get potentially something that would be digested better and don't have as many toxins or whatever, like negative things there?
Sure. So in terms of how long I've been taking them, many years. I'm not sure I remember exactly when I started, but for many years. Yes, I actually measured my blood B12 on 2 different occasions, spread apart for some years, and it was, what I wanted to see, So in terms of, more expensive, better quality, here's the reality. All supplement manufacturers claim that their supplement is the best. Usually they claim it for the same reason. Better quality, better absorption, There are those who claim that you can absorb 99% of what they actually have in the pill, which is complete stupidity, honestly, when you think of it. You ingest small quantities of what's in the supplement oftentimes, But they all do that. And sometimes these products come from the same manufacturing plants. And just this label says Nature Made, and this label said, Nature Valley or whatever other company, So I am convinced that as long as the dose is what I need, you should spend no more than the cheapest one that you find in the grocery store rather than the more expensive one. That's just my conviction. I don't believe that this business is completely unregulated. They pretty much do whatever they like. We have a lot of, discrepancies oftentimes in terms of how much is in a given pill, but we as consumers, we have to rely on what it is, and they make those claims regardless of anything. Let me maybe mention this. This might be important. If you are not a prescriber yet, I would recommend that you prescribe to Consumer Lab Report. If you Google Consumer Lab Report or just simply Consumer Lab, you will find their website. What they do is there are some physicians and pharmacists and chemists that are part of that company, and they simply go to stores and they buy whether supplements or drugs or some foods, and they evaluate and they compare to the claims on the label. Okay, so just to give you one example, we talked about, or I recommended extra virgin olive oil. So what they did, they went to a store and bought, I forget, 15 or something like that, different olive oils available in our grocery store. And they evaluated whether what's in it is olive oil or something else. And interestingly, the company that is the biggest supplier of olive oil in the American stores, what they said about that olive oil is that we don't know what it is, but we know it is not olive oil. On the other hand, olive oil from California, they said that's unadulterated olive oil. And I am convinced if you get a chance, especially if you go to like Middle Eastern stores, you will find Greek olive oil. And the reason why I recommend Greek olive oil, because again, I've been to the manufacturing plant. I've seen how they manufacture it. And I was very impressed. I'm convinced that this is unadulterated and this is, the best you can get. And then, forgive my bias, but I personally will never buy Italian olive oil. You know why? I'm not saying it's not good. I am just saying that when I was in Italy 2 times, and the first time when I was in Italy, it seemed to me that on every corner of the street they were trying to cheat me, and so my impression is that they would not hesitate to adulterate, the product, but I may be completely wrong on that one. It's just my personal thing. I would never buy it.
This was
Oh,
Italian
really?
community.
Yes. Did I say Italian? No, I meant. Now, I strongly believe if you buy something like Lebanese, or from Lebanon or, that region, it's likely unadulterated. And again, in California one, we will support, local manufacturer from California. It's, a good question. I participated actually in that International Congress on Vegetarian Nutrition in Loma Linda. I had my own lecture and like 4 lectures later or something, there was a Spanish scientist who presented her lecture, and when she finished, there were some questions, and I had a question for her, but it wasn't really related to her topic, so I was waiting for her kind of when she finishes. When she finished, I came to her and I said, look, in the town where I live, we have not just Spanish virgin olive oil, it is organic extra virgin olive oil, and it cost, and I forgot, at the time was whether $2.99 or $3.99, I forgot, per half a liter. And I said, is it possible that it can cost this little organic extra virgin olive oil? And you know what she said to me? Impossible. So there might be also something going on with that, but that's just the experience I had asking someone from Spain about that one. So you know what I do? I go to Sam's Club and I buy the one in Sam's Club. I forget the company name. And then sometimes I buy a California one, So I alternate between them, But again, the point is, I started with, if you prescribe to Consumer Lab, they will actually send you, like sometimes 2-3 times per week, an email, and it will say, curcumin, which one is the best, or what do the studies show, or turmeric, is it really helpful for that, And they actually evaluate this. They have no conflict of interest. They are not supported by any company or whatever. It's $80 or something. I think it's $80 for 2-year prescription, And you will get good information about, specific maybe, at least occasionally you will get about the specific thing that you are actually buying and using in your kitchen and or otherwise, So, yes. Sorry? WebMD, yes, is another useful, website. But yeah, the Consumer Lab, I really like what they do, and they actually have also quite a big section on their website on vitamin B12 and stuff like that, And so you may actually read some of the studies also that I have. So, okay, I see two more questions. So let's deal with 2 last questions, and then if you have any others, I will still be here, okay? Thank you for your question.
I was just wondering if the bee pollen, the fresh one that you buy from the refrigerator in the store, does bee pollen have any B12?
I have to say I am not an expert on bees and or bee pollen. I don't believe it has B12, but I have never encountered any study that would actually evaluate whether it does or does not contain B12. So if it does contain, I would be actually a little surprised, but I don't know I cannot think of any specific source, publication source that actually evaluated the content. Yes. Okay, Ma.
In your talk about the B12, you began with the rate of hydrochloric acid produced in the stomach and that affecting the absorption or digestion.
Okay.
What other factors can affect the absorption of B12?
Okay, thank you. So remember I shared with you that the stomach secretes Pepsinogen, which is the inactive form of an enzyme that is called pepsin, okay? That pepsin is essential for protein absorption, protein digestion, okay? So the conversion of pepsinogen to pepsin is done by the action of hydrochloric acid. You see? As the hydrochloric acid, or as we have less of it, and when it is weaker than in a healthy person, right, we have lower conversion rate. And that's impact the splitting of B12 from the protein that it is found in things like eggs and milk and meat, say, okay, which then will prevent from absorption. In terms of what other factors, so there are certain medications that impact, for example, and this may be applicable to some of you or some people that you might know, but patients who either have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and that may include gestational diabetes also, prescribe metformin, okay? Metformin is a drug that is actually very, very good in terms of controlling blood glucose level, but it has these nasty side effects. It blocks vitamin B12 absorption. And so patients who take this drug eventually may end up with B12 deficiency. I actually have, again, a very interesting personal experience with this particular issue, because I think it was 2016 when I submitted one of my manuscripts for publications to a journal. And in that journal, the manuscript dealt with the issue of metformin impact on vitamin B12 absorption. And I concluded that considering the negative impact of this drug on B12 absorption, all patients who are prescribed this drug should be tested for vitamin B12 deficiency. Well, guess what? The editor and or the reviewers didn't like that conclusion. They actually specifically wrote me that I made too radical conclusion in this paper, and they actually rejected my paper. I actually eventually published the paper in another journal, but interestingly, in January of 2017, for the first time ever, the American Diabetes Association, in the newest at the time standards of care of diabetic patients, stated because of the impact of metformin on vitamin B12, patients who are prescribed metformin should be tested for vitamin B12 levels. Okay. Couldn't you publish this a few months earlier? You know, I could have had, you know, a reference there, you know, so, but that's one factor, okay? People who take antacids, for example, okay? What do antacids do? They reduce the acidity of the stomach. And we just mentioned that the acid is important for the conversion of pepsinogen into pepsin, you see? So that will have an impact on vitamin B12 absorption. You know? There are other you know, agents that may destroy B12 already past absorption. For example, there are actually case studies, published case studies of young people, and don't do that at home, okay? Who, guess what they do? You know, when you buy the whipped cream to put on your cake or whatever, there is a specific compound in that some people sniff, okay? Because they feel kind of like euphoric kind of reaction. And that compound actually destroys vitamin B12 internally, okay? And the same goes for anyone who has any surgery with general anesthesia. You know, the agent that they use actually does the same for the vitamin B12. Chemotherapy patients, okay? Some of the chemo agents, again, destroyed vitamin B12 already past absorption. So there are a number of factors, you know. In my book, Vitamin B12 Combating the Epidemic of Deficiency, I listed about 25 different groups of individuals at risk of deficiency. Not saying that every one of them will develop, but again, they are at risk. They should be whether checked or, you know, take prophylactically, you know, supplements and stuff like that, not to develop this. So, again, thank you all. This was great. Thank you for all your questions. And we will be here also for a little bit if you have any individual ones. Thank you.
Can I just ask you a question? Thank you for the books. Now, I'm sure that there are people here who would like to have the books. How do we do that?
Well, good question. So you have my emails. You can send me an email, and I'll be glad to mail you one. Another option, I was actually, last weekend, I was in Greenville, South Carolina. I live in Greenville, North Carolina. I'm about 6 hours drive from Greenville, South Carolina. And guess what they did? They made one list for all participants who wanted to order whatever books. And I just, before I left, we came here on Friday. On Thursday afternoon, I went to a local post office, and I sent a package of different books to the church, and then at the church they can pick up whatever books they would like. So, you know, you can, again, send me an individual message, and I will send you, you know, I will mail you the book or books that you might be interested in. Or if you don't mind doing this through the church and having like a bulk order, you know, we can do that too. So.
Thank you so much. So I'm just thinking, you can have two options. I have 3 books. I'm going to leave them on the table. Don't steal them, please. We are going to put a paper also. If you want to go through us, just sign your name, your address, and whatever needed to be, and which book you want to have. Okay, so I'll put on the table so you can review them. I just wanted to announce 2 events that they are coming. We did this together with Chicago Bank society. We are thankful so much for Vadim and what he's doing. By the way, he have his people who are part of that. What now? Almost 7,000 people. They are followers. Over 7,000 people. Again, we are doing together another event that is going to be together, which is you all received this about Chef Mark, celebrity Chef Mark Handley. He's going to be with us on Sunday, November 10 at 3 p.m. For this one, I just want to let you know, if you want to come at 3 p.m., we are expecting a full house totally, so you would have to come a little bit earlier for this one. So that is November 10, 3 p.m. And then in December, Sunday, December 8th at 11 p.m., we are going to have holiday cooking class. Holiday cooking class, December 8th, Sunday, 11 a.m. here, that we will do that. Then for the next year, you're going to be informed what is coming. Again, thank you so much. I just wanted to see also hands. If you would like to see Dr. Pawlak again, please raise your hands. There is plenty of material, so every hand is here. So please, if you can, you're going to work together as